Well, good morning, 380. Scott Frazier, of course, day after Super Bowl. Actually, when I'm doing this, I'm in the office. It's Sunday afternoon, about 3:30. Hopefully I'll get out here in time with this little 15 minutes, and maybe I'll start part of the statistics. So what I'd like to do with this is catch up on Lacy's book, and that's what you see at the top of the Word document right here. And first of all, chapters 1 and 2, that's what I mean by parts. And so from chapter 1, if you take a look there around pages 12 to 14, and maybe I think page 11, you'll find something. Probably the NASB outcomes and standards are first. You'll see that on page 12. And I'll give you a little history there. The NASB, our national organization, was fighting things related to accountability, educational reform, and what are you accomplishing in your classes. And so in the late 80s, early 90s, they came up with an outcomes project. To make a long story short, that led to 20 outcomes and the definition of a physically educated person, which you all know that I've used for years. Has, is, does, knows, and values, those 5 statements. And then from the outcomes is where we had our first content standards. And as you can see there on pages 12, 13, and 14, the original one, 1995, had 7 standards. In 2004, we reduced them from 7 to 6, And of course, your textbook is, a couple years dated already, and so it doesn't have the newest version where we have 5 standards. Okay, so just keep that in mind. It gives you a little bit of history there. And so those were the outcomes that led to standards and things that we use, and that's primarily on pages 12, 13, and 14. The only other part from chapter 1 I'd like you to think about is that little section on alternative assessment. It mentions event tasks, it mentions portfolios, logs, student performances, things like that. Remember that we're going to use alternative, authentic, performance-based assessment interchangeably. And as Lacy defines it here, he says anything that's not a traditional assessment is an alternative assessment. Well, that's brilliant, Dr. Lacy. Thank you very much for those words of wisdom, Mr. Obvious. So, again, a traditional assessment is a written test, a skill test, something like that. And then, so anything that's not, anything that's group, projects, outside types of assignments, logs, portfolios, those type of things, that goes alternative assessment. And so that's about it from chapter 1. We've already defined a lot of the terms earlier. And now, excuse me while I just open this up. I hate this Camtasia relay thing. Let me open up what I just did here. And excuse me, this is about the 3rd time I've been through this slide here today. And so I want to talk, here we are. Let's talk about this, and let me move it over here so it gets in the middle of your slide a little bit. And there, now we can, let me just enlarge it a little bit. So good. Okay, we have, in chapter 2, Lacy mentions four learning domains. And the way the learning domains are, the one that's different is the health-related fitness domain. And some people use that as a domain, others don't. Lacy tends to call it one. And so anything that's involved with the fitness aspect as far as fitnessgram, using fitness aspects, it's more than just measurement, though. Keep in mind that health-related fitness are those 5 components of fitness: cardiovascular, muscular strength, muscular endurance, flexibility, body comp. Some people want to throw in nutrition. That's another debate for another day. Please note also, sometimes health-related fitness is confused with sports skills or skill-specific fitness. And those are aspects much like agility, coordination, speed, reaction time, jumping ability, things that are very, I would say they're very set based on genetics and the environment and how you're obviously developed. Components of fitness, for the health-related fitness, there's a certain degree of conditioning and training you can do. Sometimes there's only so much you can do to change your reaction time, your speed, and your agility. But again, those are more sports specific versus general components of fitness. So I just wanted to talk about that. Then, as you'll go to around page 27, you'll see something there about a needs assessment, a little model about a needs assessment. So if you turn in chapter 2, take a look on page 27 now. And see that nice little model, that nice little visualization there, the little visual model? A needs assessment is nothing more than a pretest. Nothing more than a pretest. It is given at the beginning, at the front end of a unit, at the front end of a semester, front end of the year, because again, that's what it is. It's a pretest, kind of like to measure where students are. And then, if you follow everything about good teaching, we should structure our teaching according to what the pretest tells us. If the pretest, if no one does well and they fail to meet the standards, or the criterion might be a better word, if the students fail to meet the criterion, then we teach the way we're going to teach. But so often happens, first of all, not a whole lot of people give pre-tests, so it'd be a worthy thing to do once in a while because you get good data. But if your initial standards are too low and the students already meet the standards or criterion, what's going to be a pretty boring unit because they already have the knowledge or the skill level. So teachers need to change and upgrade, and a lot of times that doesn't happen. And again, we've talked about some of those courses where you take the same activity, the 7th grade, the 8th grade, and maybe the 9th or 10th grade. You have it 3 different times, and it's probably the same 3 skill tests, the same 3 levels, criterions at all 3 grades. The needs assessment would say, well, that's not quite right. And of course, the post-test is the assessment. Okay, so again, a learning assessment is nothing more than a pre-test and a post-test, and then what happens. Now, the other part, looking around, it starts around 31 to 32, 33, 34. I'd like to say how these 5 steps in Lacy kind of relate to what I call the trilogy of teaching, the triangle of teaching. Or maybe I'll give it another name, but I've been talking about the 3 questions. Where are we going? How do we get there? And then the last one, how do we know when we arrive? Or we say it another way, curriculum, instruction, assessment. Well, these 5 steps kind of follow that. Except that, of course, the first 3 steps are all planning, whether it's developing a philosophy. And again, sometimes we've written mission statements in curriculum, and we write mission statements in 391, but we don't write them here. Of course, program goals. Where do I get program goals from? Well, that can be locally, okay, or it can be national. I can get them from the content standards. And so then I plan my program activities based around my goals and my philosophy, and that is the curriculum. And so all 3 of those steps, I would say, would encompass that first part of the curriculum. And then, of course, delivering the program is nothing more than that second part of the triad, the instruction. And under that page, you may note that performance-based objectives, it talks about the student will be able to make 5 out of 10 free throws. Typically, that's a type of objective, but remember now the terminology has changed so that we're using words like central focus and learning outcome versus performance-based objectives. Performance-based kind of sounds primarily psychomotor, and I don't want to say that. By the way, that other sport-specific physical fitness, that would be also in the psychomotor domain when you think about it, rather than health-related fitness. And again, step 4 is the instruction. And then if you look at figure 5, you see how figure 2.2 there, you see how all 5 of these steps relate together. The last piece, of course, is always an evaluation. And evaluation then is nothing more than the assessment piece. So that's probably the highlight of chapter 2. Again, early on they have the 4 domains. They have a little bit on the needs assessment, and then these 5 steps of program development. You have to have a philosophy and goals first in mind. And sometimes the way you develop goals and the activities is by asking students through a survey. We won't have time to do that, but sometimes in 380 we've given a survey, or developed a survey, so that we can have idea on how to plan, program, and activities that our students need and want. So again, that's, if you see here in my outline, Chapter 3 on statistics we're going to get into next from the Lacy book, your one for rental. We won't be in the Lund book today. Lund doesn't have anything on statistics like Lacy does. So that's basically start of week 3, February 3rd, 2014. And there you see the highlights there of stuff from 1 and stuff from 2. And gee, I think I'm going to come up with a term called the happy teaching triad, that curriculum, instruction, assessment. I could copyright that. I could be famous for that. Everyone's got to have a niche, and that's probably mine. Okay, so that's the end of chapter 1 and 2. I'm going to begin well, I only have 15 minutes, so I'm just going to describe statistics real quick, and then we'll start with the different ones in another screencast-o-matic. But to tell you the truth, statistics tend to scare some people because you're dealing with data. Obviously lots of numbers, and there's formulas, there's equations, there's big, long, they're scary when you look at correlation formulas and regression, and usually there are things that teachers aren't concerned with. But for our purposes, Chapter 3 is a very basic introduction to descriptive stats, and that's really what we're going to use statistics for. I do admit that I have changed my teaching on statistics because, again, we have so many programs that can help us now based on our own on our computers, on our smartphones. We have easy assessment. We have Microsoft Excel. There's SPCC for Windows. There's all kinds of software programs. So now you really don't have to do a lot more than enter the data and then describe or pick or give a test, what kind of test you want to use to analyze the data as far as significance, as far as correlation, or so on. So it's a lot easier now than what statistics used to be. So I'm just going to cover this in one day or so and again, what I'm asking you to do is simply be aware of the concepts. If you can add, subtract, multiply, and divide, you can do everything that we're going to talk about with the statistics in Chapter 3. Let's not pay attention to this YouTube video clip. That one doesn't have any volume, as I found out, so I had to come back and do another one. Okay, so in closing, let's just say that statistics, we're going to use it to describe a set of test scores. We can also use statistics to standardize scores and can make comparisons between different scores. We could use them to compare students, but again, we don't like quite to use norms like that. And then finally, we want to use it to estimate the reliability, validity, and perhaps the relationships of the test to whatever the learning construct is. The key point to think in mind as I close this part, because I'm running out of time here, is all statistics are based on probability. And it's all based on the properties of the normal curve, their normal population, which is, we call that the number of subjects, which is n, and so on. So again, probability is nothing more than what are the odds of this happening. And if you don't believe theories of probability don't exist, you've never been to Las Vegas. Because Las Vegas, if it wasn't for the theories of probability, it wouldn't be there. But of course, the house wins more based on the theory of probability. So again, Las Vegas, a lot of people go and try to beat the system. 1 or 2 might, but 100 don't. So they know what they need to do, and again, sometimes probability works against gambling and so on. It's that's probably not a good comparison to make, but it's all based on theories of probability. And so in my next one, I'm going to introduce some of the statistical techniques and terms that I'll expect you to know. This ends part 1 of catching up on Lacy.